Join us this new year for new conversations at the Commonwealth Club.
Great big crowd. I'm so excited to be here for our special guest. My name is Melissa Cain. I'm a longtime political analyst, journalist, lawyer, and over the years I've interviewed easily 100 elected officials. And it might surprise you or not to know that I don't always get the feeling they're telling me the truth. Sometimes they just stick to talking points. Or what's worse is sometimes they'll tell you one thing off camera and then they get on camera and they're like, the wall goes up and they're just giving you, whatever they want you to hear. But our guest tonight never, ever did that. It was why I always loved interviewing her, because she told you the truth. And what she told you, she believes. And that's exactly what she did. And that's why she's going to do it again. And I always appreciated that. Whatever even for people who disagreed with her politics, at least you always knew truthfully what she felt and where she stood. And she's done that for decades. And this kind of candor has endeared her to her constituents. And she has fought for expanded access to abortion and restricted access to guns. Yeah. She's fought for greater access to justice for victims of sexual assault and harassment. She has fought for Bay Area values for so many decades. She is a force of nature, and I'm thrilled to welcome her here tonight for the exit interview, Congresswoman Jackie Speier. Do I call you Congresswoman or?
Call me Jackie. That's what most people do.
We're friends. We're like this. So I think I speak for everyone when I ask what we're all wondering, which is, do you have classified documents? And if not, why not?
Very important question, because I served on the Intelligence Committee for 8 years. So I went down to the bowels of the Capitol, into a room, into a whole suite of offices and rooms, a huge door that I could have had a rotator cuff tear every time I opened it, had to leave my phone, my Fitbit, everything outside. And then you go inside, you have meetings, you have hearings, you have CIA officials and DIA officials come and testify, and you have documents that stamp top secret red on white paper on the cover of virtually everything. They were numbered. You never, ever got out of there with anything. Now, of course it's different for a president or a vice president, but not that different. And I actually fault those who were the custodians of these documents for not having a chain of custody, so that, yes, the president has this information, but it's incumbent on the person that provided that information to have it returned, because particularly for the highest ranking people in our country, those documents contain sources and methods and could out any number of persons that we're using as assets in countries around the world. So there has to be a much cleaner method by which those documents are shared with the highest ranking people in our government. For those that serve on committees, I mean, there is a process, and we follow that process. And I think that we've got to expect the same from the executive branch as well. So
should we be concerned? Or there have been some arguments out there that the departments overclassify things.
There is a fair amount of overclassification of documents, and I think we won't know the answer to that question until we see them. Now, there's a big difference between a president who voluntarily turns over documents and one who for over a year persisted in not turning over the documents. And that shouldn't be lost on any of us. I mean, that's theft. When it's identified that you have documents and you choose to ignore the archivist, that's theft. Now, I will also say, it appears that there's not enough teeth in the law as it relates to the archivist and his ability to extract the documents he needed. He couldn't do it. It was kind of, please, may I, as opposed to, and until he called on the FBI and the Department of Justice, there was no ability to get that. Now, you might wonder why it was that they ended up getting a search warrant. And they didn't do that lightly. And Merrick Garland wasn't about to do anything that looked like it was a wild goose chase. I'm pretty certain, and I think there's even been some references to someone on the inside staffing the president in Mar-a-Lago that provided that information to them.
What about President Biden? Do you think that it was a good move to appoint a special counsel to look into that issue? I mean, given Merrick Garland's an appointee? I
think the Attorney General had no choice. I think it was the appropriate action. And, it's always interesting when you look at what would have been, could have been. I mean, he could have been a Supreme Court justice. He's now serving as the Attorney General. In some respects, I think is doing probably a more important role right now than he might have been as a Supreme Court justice. Although if he had been on the Supreme Court, he might have had a different Dobbs decision. So.
And so you've been out of Congress now for a whole month, right? And things have gone straight to hell. So were you watching like the speakership battle?
Of course I was.
Just like with a glass of wine, laughing?
No, I wasn't.
So
I was tweeting. And one of my tweets went, I think, viral when I said, when Nancy Pelosi was the speaker, she knew how to count votes. She knew how to rein in her recalcitrant members, and she did it in stiletto heels.
Backwards, like Ginger Rogers. No, what do you make of this idea that the Democrats were able to sort of hammer out the speakership issues, because there were some from time to time in a caucus, and then everyone sort of sucks it up, and then you go out to vote. Tell us what goes on in those caucus meetings.
What goes on in those caucus meetings?
Like, do they cry? Do they demand weird things? Like, what's going on behind the closed doors among Democrats before you all go out and do the thing?
Oh, there's something kind of funny about Democrats and caucuses, because for the most part, what went on in the caucus was already news to the journalists before we walked out, because there were members who were always, texting, like it's, going to get them brownie points or something. I don't know. A lot of the caucuses were, pretty mundane. I mean, you talked about the issues. You'd have speakers come in. It was what happened behind the scenes. It was the other caucuses, whether it was the Congressional Black Caucus or the Progressive Caucus or the Blue Dog Caucus or the New Dem Caucus. I mean, it was when they would get together and see if they could move something, and then they would go to the speaker and try and convince her that they had the votes to mess up her schedule, and then she would always figure out that no, she did have the votes.
And I saw the documentary that her daughter did. I don't know if you've had a chance.
Oh, of course. I was there for the opening night where Alexandria was. I don't know that her mom had actually seen it ahead of time. I don't know that I would have allowed my daughter to have me on screen in my pajamas with no makeup on, or talking to the Vice President of the United States, fixing my bed, turning on the microwave, doing all the important things relevant to everyday life, since she wasn't hearing anything all that interesting on the other line.
There's this one scene that where she's trying to, it has to do with the Affordable Care Act, and she's trying to get the votes that she needs, and there's one vote that she's having trouble with, and so it's a congressperson from Indiana, and so she calls the archdiocese of the district where this person represents, and calls literally a higher power to get this person to get him to push some pressure on the on this representative. And that was just one example.
And you know where he is now? He's the ambassador to the Vatican.
She's got power.
No,
I'm kidding. but I just mean, are there other examples of things like that where you've seen
her twist arms?
Various, pulling levers for recalcitrant people, only because it seems like something Kevin McCarthy could use some help with.
She knew people's districts. She knew the names of the members' children. She knew what they wanted. She was a master. And we are so lucky in this region that we had her leading our country for as long as she did.
What is it about the Bay Area? I mean, if you look at Pelosi and Kamala Harris and Dianne Feinstein.
It's all in the water.
Is it the sourdough bread? Like, what is it? There are so many, even Gavin Newsom, so many extraordinary politicians coming out of this region. Is it just something about the local politics or the forward-thinking ideas? What do you? Well,
for the longest time, most of the statewide office holders in California were from Northern California, if you think about it. I think now we have one or maybe one Secretary of State who's from Southern California, but then again, she was appointed first. So, and Alex Padilla would have been another example. But it's a Democratic vote that's very strong and very committed in Northern California. So if you can gather the votes in Northern California, you can oftentimes, beat down the numbers that exist in Southern California.
Mark Leno used to say, who was our local supervisor and also a member of the Assembly, he used to say, and Senate, he used to say it wasn't even fair because the politics of San Francisco and politics in the Bay Area, the inter-party politics among Democrats was so intense that by the time you get to Sacramento, I mean, you roll right over these people.
Sandbox.
The former president of their PTA and now they're at the Assembly. Like, they don't stand a chance against folks who had to go with and deal with the party politics that we have here in the Bay Area. Do you think that's accurate?
Well, that's probably more true in San Francisco than in other counties, I would say. I mean, San Francisco is, raw politics.
Pretty bloody, even today. But as you watched the speakership vote unfold, I guess what I'm trying to ask is if you could give Kevin McCarthy some advice. This is a
Don't
family
run,
show. But if you could give him some advice about how to deal with, with members of your party that are kind of going off in different directions, what do you think you would do in a position like that?
Well, he wanted this so desperately that he really was willing to sell his soul, and that's frankly what he did. I mean, put your seatbelts on. This is going to be one wild ride. I don't know that, that Liz Truss little, it was something, I don't know, I guess it was online where they had a lettuce and then they had Liz Truss see which one would last longer.
The lettuce.
Try it. I think he's going to have a hard time, but he wanted it so much, and he, lost it back in 2016, I guess it was, when he was in line to become speaker, and he had a extramarital relationship that prevented him from succeeding in that particular race. But
it was a simpler time.
That was
Now that doesn't matter. It's
So I think, he, in fairness to him, he raised a truckload of money, got a lot of people elected, some of whom were then very happy to vote against him until they got their pound of flesh. So, he has, his hands are really tied.
Do you miss it, or are you or both, or are you watching and saying, hilarious and
I couldn't take my eyes off of the vote. How many of you were watching it? Yeah, it was kind of like comedy and drama, and it was sort of like at one point I was very intent on watching it. My husband said, "Come on, you don't have to worry about that." I said, "It was 15 years of my life."
So you wish you were back there, or you're like, man, I wish I could have been there to see the almost fist fight?
Well, I'm sure many of you have heard how this all evolved. I mean, it wasn't my plan to leave Congress when I did. It was my husband's plan. But I had made a promise to him that if I got sexual assault taken out of the chain of command in the military, that I would retire. And after that happened, I assumed that I could, thank you. It was a big deal. I thought that I could go and ask for, a pass again. And he didn't give me one. So I had to keep my word.
Well, so speaking of things that are normal now, that aren't, maybe didn't used to be normal, it's hard to know. George Santos. I could not find another example of someone lying this hard about everything. I mean, DC is not exactly, the Vatican, but it seems like this is an extraordinary case. Like, what do you make of this, and what do you think should or will happen?
Well, you can point the fingers at a lot of people. I mean, he is a defective person. But having said that, a local weekly newspaper uncovered this, and the New York Times did not pick it up. So shame on the New York Times. Congratulations to this Weekly Standard or whatever the name of it was. And, I would like to see how much money we actually, on the Democratic side, put into that race. Because there should have been opposition research done to determine all of this. And if it wasn't done, why wasn't it done? So, you can point fingers in a number of different places. The problem now is that he's there. He's a vote for the speaker. And he's not going anywhere until the U.S. attorney, the Justice Department, takes action against him, which they will, because he has lied under penalty of perjury in terms of his campaign statements. So, and he's probably laundered money. So I'm sure some of that is going to come out. The problem for Kevin McCarthy now is that he sucks all of the oxygen out of the room. So what is their message? Their message is George Santos right now, because that's all that people are talking about.
Like, as a Democrat, is this not the worst thing that could happen, to have this defective on the other side that you can be like, look what they're bringing?
It's just a sad commentary that in our society and in our culture now, lying is so commonplace. We had a president who lied thousands and thousands of times, and it was acceptable to a significant part of the population. So I think that it's going to hurt all of us in terms of getting the work done that needs to happen in Congress. I mean, the debt limit is going to have to be raised.
Yeah, what do you make of what's coming on that, in terms of how that's going to potentially be negotiated? I know there's always a push for a clean lift of the debt limit, but is that even going to be possible?
I think that there has to be a clean debt limit increase. I mean, it's kind of it's the simple way of of defining it is you buy things with your credit card. At the end of the month, you have to either pay off that credit card statement or pay down that credit card statement. I mean, we have spent this money already. We don't have the luxury of saying, oh, we're just not, I mean, it's the full faith and credit of this government that's at stake here. So Kevin McCarthy on Face the Nation yesterday said he was not going to let that happen. So let's see. They're going to try and extract any number of things out of it. But even when you look at the budget, when you look at how much of it is mandatory spending, I mean, it's money for Social Security, it's money for Medicare, it's money for Medicaid, it's money for Veterans Affairs. I mean, you've got just a very limited area of discretionary funding. You know what's under discretionary funding? Defense. And then some of the other national parks. You know, when we actually had a government shutdown, I was really concerned about, you know, people getting their checks and all those kind of daily needs. Do you know what the biggest issue was in the American people? It was closing the national parks. So they are a jewel in our crown, but I mean, they're highly regarded by the American people, and that was a big hit.
So you think that it will probably be maybe Democrats plus a few Republicans?
So there's probably 10 to 12 Republicans who are maybe moderates, and who don't want to see the debt limit breached. By not raising it. So once they're given the okay by Kevin McCarthy to do so, they'll probably join the Democrats in doing it.
Well, I know there are certain pieces of legislation around abortion and gun rights that Democrats would like to see put forward, but is that pretty much shelved for the next 2 years now that we have Republican control?
It's DOA. Do not expect anything on any of those issues. It's very sad. You know, as a victim of gun violence, I feel really passionate about this issue. And for us as a country to not have universal background checks is, I mean, that's the lowest bar, and we can't even get that passed, even though that's the law. The Brady law was you had to get background checks. But that was before gun shows and before internet purchases and before person-to-person purchases. And so all of those are not subject to background checks. So you absolutely need that. And once we registered machine guns, you know, you can register a machine. You used to be able to register machine guns. All of that came under control. So registering guns would be another important thing. Why is it when we did pass this so-called reform bill after Uvalde last year, we couldn't get something as simple as no assault weapons can be purchased by anyone between the ages of 18 and 21? We couldn't get that in. Do you know what they got in? They were patting themselves on the back because, we had just broken the logjam after 30 years of not being able to get any reform legislation through on gun violence. It was a more enhanced background check if you're purchasing an assault weapon between the ages of 18 and 21. Now think of those who have been mass shooters who are between 18 and 21. They don't have records. So it would not have affected their actions. They would still have been able to purchase those guns. So it's a travesty. I was in Europe at the time, and I came back from a dinner, turned on the TV, and there were 14 kids that had died in Uvalde. Overnight, it was 21. The next day, I was meeting with the head of what our CIA is. I think I was in Denmark at the time. And I asked them, how many mass shootings did they have last year? And he looked at me kind of, shrugged his shoulders and said, none. Now think of it. We have more mass shootings than there have been days in this year. already. So then I came home and I had my staff do some research. There's about 400 million people that live in the EU. It's 330 million people that live here in the United States. In 2020, it's the last year that I had data on both entities. In the EU, there were something like 2,500 deaths by gun violence. In 2020, there were 45,000 gun violence deaths in the United States. It is abnormal.
It seems like the NRA has declined in prominence. Is there a new, or maybe it's more powerful and we're just not seeing, but it seems like it's kind of, it had some budgetary problems, some leadership problems, and it seems to have fizzled a bit, it appears. Are they still a force? And if not, is there a new, or is it more dispersed now?
So they are still a force, although they have been, I think, wounded somewhat. But there's the Gun Owners Association now. There's the manufacturers, the gun manufacturers. I mean, there are more guns in this country than there are people. More than 330 million guns in this country.
And I believe you were in Monterey.
When?
Recently, after the, did I see that right on the Twitter? That you had gone down after the recent shooting.
Oh, in Half Moon Bay.
I'm sorry, Half Moon Bay. I apologize.
No, I was actually in Southern California at the time. That's a 67, and that's the other thing. These profiles of these two killers in Monterey Park and in Half Moon Bay, they don't fit the profile. One was 67, I think one was 72. And what were the triggering events? The triggering event in Monterey Park had something to do with his ex-wife. The triggering event in Half Moon Bay was the fact that his coworkers mocked him and that his supervisor had just fined him $100 because he was using a forklift and damaged something. And the $100 fine put him over the edge. So, and in Half Moon Bay, they were all targeted. He went after people who he felt had somehow harmed him, hurt him. So I think that there's a lot more that we have to do in terms of, well, we've got to rein in accountability relative to guns. And I think registration has got to be part of that now. And the universal background checks and not letting kids buy guns until they're 21. Why is a 6-year-old have a gun in his backpack? Now, the other thing that we do know is that kids know when a kid has a gun or has the potential to shoot. They hear about it. No, that's why these community officers are actually helpful to have on school campuses, because the kids are more likely to go and tell them.
Oh, interesting. I did read that there was some knowledge beforehand, which is baffling, to say the least. I guess they're doing an investigation, and we'll see how that fell through the cracks. But that somebody did try to report.
I did a lot of work when I was chair of the Military Personnel Subcommittee in Armed Services, and we had a huge increase in the number of suicides in Alaska. So I made a number of trips to Alaska last year to try and see if we could fix this situation, because it's remote. They're often alone. They come from southern states, and then they're put in this very cold environment. And so I had a hearing, and one of the experts who spoke, when asked, what can we do? It was amazing what he said. What he said was, offer these service members gun safes or gun locks. Now that sounds pretty simple, right? But just the length of time it takes to put in the combination or unlock the gun safe is oftentimes enough to get the person to rethink doing it. It's impulsive. I mean, when we look at the gun deaths, of course, 2/3 of them are suicides.
2/3 of that 45,000 number? Suicides? Wow.
So in one of these cases, it was a staff sergeant just gotten back from visiting his family, was about to go to a special program in Georgia and see some of his old buddies, went to Walmart, bought a couple of video games so they could play them, went back to his apartment to just pick up something, left the engine running, went upstairs, shot himself. For 5 hours, that car was running before anyone figured out what was going on. So that impulse is something that we have to deal with as well.
And that's going to have to be in 2025, I suppose, now that we've got a Republican-controlled House, unless there are some moderates that could potentially vote with Democrats, because we saw in the speakership vote, Democrats were pretty well disciplined to say, there was never, and I think the Republicans too, there was never any talk about helping each other out.
No, he would
about a couple of
that.
these guys kind of like that was never on both sides were like, no, we will figure this out. We will literally fist fight each other before we will ask the other side for help. And so the both sides kind of dug in, but one hopes that, I mean, aside from the speakership debate, that going forward, there could be more cooperation on more substantive issues like the debt ceiling, or potentially, even a little bit of some of the issues that we've been talking about.
There will be very, very little compromise. I mean, only on something as big as the debt ceiling will you have members kind of crossing over. I think that would be my expectation, having watched the process as long as I have.
Okay, on a lighter note, we're all doomed. There you go. At least for 2 years. So are there any Republicans who sort of have a persona that they portray on like Fox News or other Newsmax or other really conservative outlets that you found to be sort of closeted,
Nice guys?
nice, and normal?
You'd be surprised how many of them are. Where you can sit down, have a great conversation, get to know them. Jim Banks was my ranking member on MilPERS for a period of time. We had long conversations about his children who had some issues. One of my children had some learning issues, and so we were, talking about them. I gave him a book that I thought would be very helpful. Then you'd see him ranting, and you think you were dealing with a whole completely different person.
Are there any others like that? Is Matt Gaetz secretly like really nice?
Matt Gaetz loves himself. And he's only been eclipsed by, his new colleague that is taking some of the,
Is it Boebert?
No.
Or
I'm
Roderick?
talking about our liar.
Oh, George.
George.
George is taking the heat.
He's taking the spotlight. No, I mean, they are provocative intentionally. And that's pretty obvious. They say something incredibly provocative, and then they fundraise off of it. That's the MO.
And that's something that John Boehner said.
Mm-hmm.
And he basically said, look, they're looking for the clip to play on Fox News. They're not really necessarily looking to get something specific done. Is there anyone on the Democrat side who does things like that?
I wouldn't tell you their names if I thought of them.
Oh, come on. I said you tell the truth.
I'm trying to think who does that on the Democratic side. There's some members that, and they could be different depending on what the issue is, that will say something that they, believe it, and then will fundraise off it right away. and that's, you know, the elephant in the room, I guess the donkey in the room, that we, money controls so much of what goes on back there.
Now, you're in a safe Democratic district, but one of the things that has always struck me as like the least fun part of being in Congress is the fundraising and dialing for dollars. Now, your constituents love you. You know, once you're in. But so maybe it wasn't as much of a task for you as some other folks who are in more difficult districts and need more money. But how much of your time did you spend fundraising?
I spent very little time fundraising. I would do a big birthday, what I would call a birthday bash every year in the district, and that would raise like $200,000. I did smaller events in DC, but and I would, you know, 2 weeks before the event, I would make phone calls. But I did not. There are some members that are in what are called marginal districts, and they are expected to be on the phone for 5 to 7 hours every day. Think about that. So they show up to committee either, you know, when you could Zoom in, or, you know, they come into the committee room and then 10 minutes later they leave. So they've registered as being present, and then they go and have to make phone calls. One of my colleagues worked so hard and raised so much money, millions and millions and millions of dollars, and lost her election by, you know, a very small margin. But she's, after all that, gone.
How are you supposed to legislate with
Exactly.
that?
That's the real question. You know, when I got to Congress, I was pretty shocked at the system, because in the state legislature, you introduce a bill, you get a hearing. If you can't get the majority of the members there to vote for it, then you lose the bill. But if you can get a majority to vote for it, then the bill moves through the process. In Congress, all these bills that people introduce, most of them, I'd say 95% of them, never have a hearing. Now, their bill might be an amendment at some point in a bigger bill, but those are often few and far between.
I think some of the changes that the holdouts for the speaker's race wanted to see were things like more votes,
more amendment, what's called an open rule, so that anyone could, put in an amendment and have it in order to be taken up. Now, when you have open rules, you can guarantee you're going to get very little done, because there's going to be long debates on each of these amendments. And if, let's say, just, a quarter of the members would introduce amendments, that's still, 100 amendments for every bill.
Having said that, do you think that Congress is too small? And by that, I just mean we're such a long way from what the founders envisioned in terms of one representative for every 30,000 people. Now we are far beyond that. Would you support, or do you think that there's room for debate over whether there should be more members of Congress? Because there's there's such a distance. Not with you, of course. Other people. Sorry.
Some members have entire states, right? Look at Wyoming. You have one House member and 2 U.S. senators. What our founding fathers had cobbled together, and it was remarkable at the time. They did it in a short period of time, and it's lasted for 240 years. But when you realize that California and our population, we have 2 senators, it would equal the population of 11 different states to equal California's population. So 22 U.S. senators to our 2. So, you really have a situation where one person, one vote, and equal representation is somewhat skewed. Now, if I had my way, we would have a unicameral legislature. Because what happens, you can pass all the bills you want in the House, but the Senate never takes your bills up, right? So if you had a unicameral legislature, then you're going to be dealing with all of these bills in one House, and there's some equal power.
I think the French tried that. Didn't go well. So is that a yes or no on whether you think there should be more representatives in Congress so that they're
Representing fewer
people?
I don't know that that would improve anything. It's just going to magnify what we already have.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Fair enough. Okay, so who does the poker game? We know there's a poker game. Who controls the poker game?
I don't know that there's a poker game.
Oh, come on.
No, I mean, if there are poker games, they're not played in the Democratic cloakroom. If they're being played, they could possibly be played in the Republican cloakroom. There was what was called a Board of Education room in the Capitol. And it was where Sam Rayburn did have poker games, and they drank and they smoked cigars in this Board of Education room. And the Speaker has control of it. Speaker Pelosi, in her inimitable fashion. So in this room, beautifully painted murals. There's a big Lone Star on one wall because Sam Rayburn was from Texas. So before she left as Speaker, she had 2 murals done on the sides. One was of the Golden Gate Bridge, and the other was of the suffragists.
I'm sure Kevin McCarthy loves that. I love that. But do Democrats have any game? Do you have cornhole? What do you guys do? Where are the deals done?
If they're playing poker, I've not been invited to play.
Okay. Alrighty. So we have a question here. What's the future of universal health care coverage in California? This audience member wants to know.
Well, we have a superlative program now, and Covered California is there for Californians who don't have insurance through their government employment, and it is and continues on a federal level also to be subsidized so that the monthly payments are reduced based on your income level. In terms of getting Medicare for all, if that's what the question is, if you look at countries in Europe, that's their world. That's how they do it. But we're not there yet. So the Affordable Care Act will go down as one of Speaker Pelosi's greatest achievements. And we're very lucky that we have it.
And a question here. What is next for Jackie Speier?
What is next for Jackie Speier? So I just made the point over and over again that I wasn't retiring. I was coming home to make good trouble. And that's what I plan on doing. One of the things that I have done is I started a foundation in San Mateo County. And I seeded it with $1 million that was left in my campaign coffer. And it's for women and children. And my goal is to eradicate childhood poverty in San Mateo County. And if we do it there, I want to see it done throughout the 9 Bay Area counties. To put it in perspective, San Mateo County is the 4th richest county in the country. There are some 3,000 counties, and we're the 4th richest. We have 20 billionaires that live there. We have 5,000 millionaires that make $4.1 million on average. And 90% of their giving is nationally and internationally. So we've got 23,000 kids who live below the federal poverty rate of a family of 4 living on $27,000 a year. We've got 21 kids that are homeless. We've got an increase in domestic violence of 20%. Highest increase in food stamp pickup in the entire state. So I make that case to say that we have hiding in plain sight a lot of poverty. We have it here in San Francisco. We have it in counties in the Bay Area. And yet we're not fixing the problem. So I'm hoping to do that.
Excellent. Now, I know the answer to this because I read your wonderful book called Undaunted, available at reputable booksellers. And this question is, though, when did you meet Senator Feinstein, and how did her career impact your own?
So I met her when I was on the Board of Supervisors, and she was the mayor. And we would have meetings from time to time between the two counties. And that's how I first met her. She took me under her wing a little bit because she saw parallels in our lives, because her second husband died and she was widowed, Feinstein. And my first husband was killed in an automobile accident when I was pregnant with our second child. So we sort of bonded on that experience.
Well, also in your book, Undaunted, available at reputable booksellers, you talk about how you were literally in the hospital after being shot at Jonestown, and found out that Harvey Milk and Mayor Moscone had been shot. I mean, this is all happening very close to each other.
Guyana, the horrific incident in Guyana where Congressman Ryan was assassinated happened on November 18th, 1978. 10 days later, Mayor Moscone was assassinated and Dianne Feinstein became mayor. I was at the Baltimore Shock Trauma Center because I had gas gangrene through my body, and they thought they were going to have to amputate my arm and or my leg. So they gave me these hyperbaric chamber treatments where they infused your body with oxygen. It was a very unpleasant experience. And I was coming out of one of those dives, as they referred to them, and the doctor came up to me and says, "I don't know how to tell you this, but Mayor Moscone has just been assassinated." And I'm, in what looks like a lung machine, and I'm thinking the world was coming to an end. I just thought that it was, and there was obviously nothing I was going to be able to do about it.
Certainly lots of moments shared in a cosmic way with Dianne Feinstein. So this person asked, what is the best thing, anything, Democrats can do for the next 2 years? I'm looking for any ray of hope. We appreciate your candor.
What can we do? Well, I think it's going to be very important we're lousy messengers. We don't stay on message. I hope the Democratic caucus is going to come up with a message that is resonant with the American people. And we have to be prepared to offer alternatives to what the Republicans are going to be doing. I mean, it's going to be one character assassination attempt after another. I mean, they're going to go after Anthony Fauci. They're going to go after the Secretary of Homeland Security. They're going to probably, go after Hunter Biden. I mean, they're going to make this as much as they can an indictment of policies around COVID, policies around the border, and a corruptness that they perceive that Joe Biden is engaged in. I mean, it is kind of breathtaking to think that they can do all of this with a straight face. I think they're going to find that they're not very effective at doing it. But I think Democrats should continue to propose legislation that's going to fix what ails us. I mean, I think everyone's concerned about inflation, and try to lift the burden that people feel. I mean, 70% of the population right now thinks that we're going in the wrong direction. So we've got to find some ways to make them feel that we care. The best way you can do that is spending a lot of time in your district, and I hope that's what my colleagues will do.
Yeah, see, I bet you're glad we have a Senate now. Okay, question here. Republicans seem to look at Democrats as the enemy. And I think the question is just sort of a cry for help. But I think this person is concerned about the level of vitriol and dehumanization that is scary, because that usually precedes, or often can precede, something, truly terrifying.
So, it really goes back to Newt Gingrich. He's the one that really changed the dynamics in Congress. When Tip O'Neill was the speaker, he would sit down with President Reagan and they would find ways to negotiate. People also, Republicans and Democrats, would get to know each other, their families, their children. It created an environment where, you would listen to each other more. But Newt Gingrich created this model that, frankly, has just taken hold, and it goes on regardless of who's in power now. It's all about winning the next election and defeating the other party.
What can you tell us about Hakeem Jeffries? We're spoiled here in the Bay Area. We've had Nancy Pelosi for so long being either the speaker or the minority leader. And so now there's this new person. What's he like?
He's obviously a gifted orator, and will, given the opportunity, will be spellbinding, I think, for the American people to listen to. He's fairly reserved. He's very thoughtful. He is going to have to learn on the job, though. It's going to be challenging with the Republicans, but just with this, early salvos in pushing back on the Republicans, he certainly has what it takes to be very effective. He's a very good man.
Good to know. And we think that's why. So Nancy Pelosi, of course, stepped down from the speakership, but still was remaining in Congress, hopefully standing by as a mentor. And
she doesn't want to play that role. I mean, she was asked to sit behind Hakeem during the speaker's battle, and she chose not to. She was sitting way in the back with some of the other California members. She doesn't want to fundraise anymore. I mean, after raising $1 billion or more over the course of her career, I don't think, if you want to know my opinion, I don't think she's going to be there for very long. I think I see an ambassadorship in her future myself.
Oh boy, well, there's no shortage of hopefuls here in San Francisco who would love that. So how do we stop alternative fictions, aka Trumpism, from turning into alternative facts?
Well, they already have, haven't they? I mean, we have these echo chambers now. I mean, we used to have, 3 TV stations, right? And you flipped from one to the other. Now you've got your buffet of what to watch. And they have become echo chambers of whatever the particular philosophical bent is that you are. So, we tend to listen to people that think like we do. I encourage you to spend 20 minutes listening to Fox News every night. See if you can do 20 minutes of listening to Fox News. I try to do it, and I lose it after about 10 minutes. I just can't handle it anymore.
And Fox News isn't even, the right views Fox News as being.
Oh, it's not. It's yeah, that's right. It's
They're
too tame.
Newsmax and these other outlets. Somebody asked here, can the debt limit be repealed? Like, can we stop doing this thing?
This little dance? Yes, it could. It was a law that was put on the books, I don't know, maybe 30 years ago. And, it really should be repealed because it makes no sense. There have been bills introduced to do that. And, they get nowhere in the Senate.
What TV show is most accurate at portraying Washington?
What TV show? That's a hard one. Throw out some names of shows.
Okay, West Wing, Veep. There's what's the Kevin's House of Cards?
House of Cards, I'd say. There's a lot of House of Cards going on. those poker games you were talking about. Yeah, there is a fair. I mean, it was slightly to the extreme, but yeah, there is some of that. West Wing, I'm not as familiar with because I don't work in the White House. But
well, I'm just glad you didn't say Veep because.
no.
So it's a little scary. This person wants to know, what are you most proud of?
My kids. Legislatively, all right, I guess he or she was asking it. There are, I think in the state legislature, getting financial privacy through was probably my biggest achievement there, although I did a lot of work on consumer protection as well. In Congress, I'd say changing the leadership's perspective within the military about the people that serve. I think for the longest time they were just cogs in a wheel, and they're people, and you're not going to be able to recruit good, talented service members if you treat them like S. So I'd say, getting sexual assault cases taken out of the chain of command. 20,000 men and women are sexually assaulted in the military every year. Only 5,000 report because they don't trust the system. That hopefully now is going to change because we're taking them out of the chain of command. They're going to be independent prosecutors and investigators that are going to handle those cases. But pediatric cancer, I did a lot of work on pediatric cancer, and we're now increasing the amount of research in pediatric cancer. It was 1% before, now it's closer to 8%. Something I worked with Congressman Mike McCall from Texas, a Republican. So, it's an example where you can do a lot of bipartisan work as well. I didn't get the ERA passed. That's one of my big regrets. And I got the breast cancer research stamp renewed, which I'm pleased with. So those were some of the measures I'm most pleased with.
Do you miss anything?
Yes, I miss it all.
What don't you miss?
I don't miss the commute. It was so nice. Who don't?
Who don't you miss? Are there any Democrats you will not miss?
I would never tell you that.
Well, it's worth a shot. You're here. Okay. This person wants to know, can you imagine a scenario in which Congress, can you imagine a scenario in which Congress can become responsive again to the public interest and the middle class?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that the sooner we have the next generation of leaders taking over Congress, the better off we're going to be. I do think that we are stuck. And I think whether it's gun violence, transgender, gay rights, they're not issues for younger generations. The baby boomers need to exit left. And the sooner all of us get out of there, it's time for another generation to lead our country.
This person wants to know, if there are more guns than people, then can we buy them back and destroy them at $5,000 or $10,000 per weapon? I feel like that's a lot.
It's a lot of money. But I will say this. During my time in Congress, I funded 7 or 8 gun buybacks. And it was really eye-opening. I did some here in San Francisco because I represented part of the city, and I did some in San Mateo County. There actually was a machine gun that was returned. There were sawed-off shotguns. There were 3 or 4 Uzis. There were guns that had the serial number scratched out, which suggests that they were probably crime guns. That in an area where, you would suggest it's pretty peaceful. I remember this one gentleman. I was walking along the line of cars, so we had all the, sheriffs and police out there because you're dealing with guns that could or could not be loaded. And there's this gentleman in this car, and he's got this revolver on the seat next to him. And I said, "Thank you for bringing your gun in." He says, "Yeah, my wife and I got this as a wedding present. I don't think we need it." Who in their right mind gives someone a gun as a wedding present?
I mean, it was on the registry, so I mean, it'd be rude not to. Might you run for office again? I know there's a Senate seat that might be coming up here soon, or you can.
I'm not running.
You might get a
Senate.
Pass for something.
No, I'm not getting another. I can guarantee you, I'm not getting another pass to go back to Congress. I don't know what's in the future, but it's not going to be Congress.
All right. Well, I just lost $20, so. Okay. All right. This person wants to know, what about a compromise of 50% in service cuts and 50% tax increases on the wealthy? I don't know. That seems symmetrical, but I feel like that might not be.
So the problem is that there's all this mandatory spending that takes up close to 50% of the budget. So then you're left with a much smaller universe. You've got, as I said, national defense. You've got these social programs like food stamps and mental health, and then you've got some veteran benefit programs and national parks. So if you have to take, the cuts would have to be so draconian to those programs that you would zero out some of them. So don't forget that there was this massive tax cut that was provided to the wealthy under President Trump that is adding to that debt. It was, I think, over $1 trillion adding to that debt. So I think that the solution is going to be complex. And it's going to require us to, do a lot of soul searching about what's important. Do we want seniors to be able to live out their lives with a certain degree of prosperity? I mean, Social Security came into place when the people in poverty were mostly seniors at the time. People don't save much money for retirement. It's close to $50,000 is what the average person has in retirement money set aside. It's not going to be easy, but it's going to, I personally would like to see a flat tax, because, the wealthy always find ways to get around paying taxes. If everyone had to pay, 15, 20%, except those who made under X number of dollars, I think we would have a more equitable system. But the income inequality in this country is huge. And for the 90% of the population, their income has not gone up much at all. But those in the top 10% and those in the top 1%, their income has skyrocketed, even during COVID. So the equalization has to happen in that manner, I think.
We have time for one last question, and then we have a special presentation for you.
Okay.
So, don't go anywhere. But so the final question I have for you is, in your book, Undaunted, you write a lot about your life's purpose and how that is something you think about, and it's something that is important to you. And you write that your life's purpose is to advocate for people who are not in a position to advocate for themselves. So are we there yet? Did you do it?
Well,
How do you feel about where you are in your journey?
So I think I've done it for, a number of groups of people that are voiceless, but I still think there's more to be done. That's why I'm coming home to do it.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you so much. I think we also have a presentation.
Hi, on behalf of the Commonwealth and Leadership Circle, we'd like to give you
Thank you
flowers.
very
You're
much.
welcome.
They're
Sure thing.
beautiful. Thank you. Thank you.
There we go. That's the first time I've ever seen them give flowers to someone, so very, very special. Many thanks to Jackie Spear for joining us today for today's exit interview program at the Commonwealth Club. We want to thank everyone who attended this program live here today, as well as the folks who are joining us online. If you want to watch more programs or support the Commonwealth Club's efforts to make both the virtual and in-person programming possible, please visit commonwealthclub.org/events. Thank you. Stay safe, everyone. Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.